I think what's lacking is I work on the trading floor in a bank, right?
How do you think AI is going to change the industry?
To go into the right direction. And I think it's something that is probably a bit difficult for government to do, right? But I think there's lots of initiatives, for example, Two Hearts. I think it is really something that every one of us can do, from Russia, from Africa, from Latin America, all sitting together.
So before we dive into your career, let's talk about Two Arts, one of Europe's largest and fast-growing tech communities for people with immigrant backgrounds, which you have co-founded. What inspired you actually to start Two Arts, and what experiences back then made you realize that a community like Two Hearts today could make a difference and help?
Actually, not a co-founder. So the founders are Iskander, Gülşah, and but I was one of the founding members. So essentially we were a group of like 20, 30 people. Iskander reached out back then. And back when I started also working in the tech space in Germany, it was still, I think, a less diverse place than it is today. It's now almost 6 years ago. And it was very rare that there were people with migrant backgrounds working in any kind of venture capital fund, etc. And that obviously had lots of bad repercussions, that fewer teams had migrant backgrounds, etc., etc., because this is just something that is quite normal behavior, and that when Iskander and I spoke about this, we realized that really the tech industry is like one of the most meritocratic industries. It really helps people essentially move through social classes. And you see that also in the US, right, where people working in tech, if you look at the C-levels, I think of all the big tech companies, it's like people with Indian descent, etc., etc. Then you see that it's really an equalizer. And that's why we believe that this type of network really plays an important role in the tech industry more than anywhere else, where you really have the opportunity to help people essentially leapfrog generations by working in tech.
So you grew up as a child of two Turkish immigrants. Can you tell us maybe how that affected you as a child at school or in generally in your social environment?
Of course, I think I was born in 1990. I think it was still a little bit different world back then. Um, and I was born in Frankfurt, and I was raised in Frankfurt, which is a very multicultural city. So I think it has a much higher share of people with migrant background than other cities in Germany. And for me, it was quite an interesting place to grow up, because we had our little circle essentially of people from former Yugoslavia, from Africa, from India, etc. And we were really, I would say, hanging around or hanging out together a lot. This has obviously led to also, I think, different kind of role models that you would have in your life. And therefore, as I grew up, like I think even when I did my Abitur, I didn't really know what I would study, because like no one really studied in my family. So it was something where I had a lot of benefits from like certain individuals who like I met through either like extended family or in my network, that helped me really realize, okay, what are the things you should focus on and how do you get to where you want to be. And this was also, I think we talked a little bit about Two Hearts, right? I'm also a mentor in Two Hearts, so I talk to people that come out of uni or are going into uni, and they have questions on their career. And for me, the thing that I wanted to help people with is having essentially these types of role models. I'm not saying that I'm like perfect in what I do, but I've done a certain path, right? And I can tell people about the experience and what it's like and what I would have done differently. Just being able to give people this advice is something that I would have loved to have growing up. And so that's one thing that's very dear to my heart.
Yeah, really inspiring. That's also our mission with our podcast, to give especially founders with an immigrant background a space to talk about things like that. So maybe what have you learned about yourself through your journey and involvement in being a founding member of Two Hearts?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think what I learned or what I saw is that there's obviously a lot of people with similar experience, right? I think also like Turkish well, people with Turkish descent, right? They're now in the third generation, so it's kind of like you say, like it takes 3 or 4 generations for people to integrate properly into society. And like I think it was interesting to see, or it is interesting to see that essentially they're people with similar experiences to me, and they also want to give back. And I feel like this kind of feeling of trying to pass it on to the next generation is something that connected me with a lot of other people. I think there's people do it in different ways, right? But I think generally see that this is something that many people that come from that kind of background share. The other thing is that I think it helped me reflect a lot about all the decisions I took in my life and why I am where I am today, and what kind of goals I have, what drives me, like what were the things that or the big decisions I took and why I took them. And this helps me also understand a little bit going forward how to take decisions. And that's something that obviously like these kind of mentoring things, it feels a little bit like you're giving back, but at the same time you learn a lot about yourself as well. So it's actually really a nice interaction for both sides.
Okay. You've just mentioned that Two Hearts can feel like giving back a bit, as well as that such a network can have a significant effect on the tech industry and you as an individual in it. Could you please share some tangible differences you've observed in the 5 years since being a founding member, along with specific examples of community positive impacts on individuals and maybe how people found their co-founder or startups?
Yeah, I think generally like diversity in the ecosystem has increased quite a lot from, I would say, first like the investors level, right? So I think there are many more people now um, that are not, I would say, or that have this migrant background that are also people that are deciding who to fund. I think this is the first and important change. This then in turn has an effect on the next level where you say, okay, well, the founding teams look more diverse than they did a decade ago. And if you then look one level deeper, also the people that work in those companies have a lot more, yeah, I would say cultural diversity. And so we see that a lot in our company. I think we're fully Berlin based. I think we have like 10% of our people not working in Berlin. At the same time, I think probably at least half of the people don't speak a single word in German, right? It's people that have moved to Berlin for job purposes, to work in tech, to also have a different life. And that's something that I think also looks probably a lot different to 10 years ago. At the same time, when I look at the Two Hearts, right, like it started off as a very small circle, it grew. We're now a lot of people in this organization, and it gets a lot more professional. I think there's still a lot help that the organization needs, right, in terms of like funding and perhaps also people volunteering, helping essentially making the wheels turn. But we see obviously a lot of people networking there, meeting friends, spending time together, whether it's on work topics or also even just going on holidays, etc. So this is something that really I think is a very nice thing to see, that a lot of people enjoy or benefit from this kind of ecosystem in different ways.
It takes 3 or 4 generations, you just said, for immigrants to integrate into a new society. But you just mentioned that the tech industry is a meritocratic industry, giving you the possibility to leapfrog certain generations. Have you noticed any challenges or topics among Two Hearts members that also reflect your own experiences?
So I think what you can say is like people enjoy working in an environment that's similar to kind of the way they grew up and similar to like people that they like, right? And I think what you see is different industries have a different demography, right? So if you look at whatever, like Mittelstands company in the middle of Germany or somewhere in Brandenburg or whatever, I think the majority of people working currently at Bunch or working in the tech industry generally would not thrive in that environment. And this is due to many different reasons, right? But I think this kind of demographic and company culture topic is a very important one. And for us, for example, as Bunch, we care a lot about cultural fit. So for us, it's important, and people are like open-minded. They enjoy their time together. They try to help each other. Like they try to help each other thrive, right? And curiosity is super important. So always looking for new experience, new information. So and this, I think, is also a type of culture that probably is very, or resonates with a lot of people in the tech ecosystem. And I think that's why also a lot of people, probably I would say more than average, that work in the tech industry come from this migrant background, because it is this kind of culture, this kind of environment that those people enjoy and where they thrive in. And that's also one of the reasons why I, for myself, knew I would never want to work in like a big corporate company somewhere. Like I studied engineering, right? I'm a mechanical engineer. I could have never worked for like a mechanical engineering business somewhere in the middle of nowhere. Like for me, this was always clear. And that's why back in the days when I then decided where I start my career, I moved to London, which was like an incredibly international environment. I worked on the trading floor in a bank, right? Like I had colleagues from China, from Russia, from Africa, from Latin America, all sitting together and grabbing lunch together. And like we realized that those people care about the same things, they enjoy the same things. It makes the team also much more effective and efficient. And that's something that I also see a lot in the tech industry in Germany.
Levent, I'm just wondering, in your eyes, are there any factors, any things that the government has fundamentally to change, to especially just to make it easier for migrants in early ages, to have more opportunities, as you said?
I think Germany offers you quite a solid kind of like educational system. I think what's lacking is the role models that help people go into the right direction. And I think it's something that is probably a bit difficult for a government to do, right? But I think there is lots of initiatives. For example, Two Hearts, when we started out, we also thought, do we do this in schools, right? We then said, okay, it doesn't work. Like if this kind of ecosystem thrives because the people are very similar ages, similar interests, and like this would perhaps overcomplicate things, and especially with limited funding makes it very difficult to have an impact. But I think it is really something that every one of us can do, right? Like just reach out in the local communities, try to become a role model for people, even if it's one person, right? Like they tell their 3-4 friends, and that already has a very, very big impact on people. And so this is, I think, something more on the shoulders, I would say, of people to give back to the younger generation.
So let's go to another topic, which is your studies. You have a really finance focused. You also mentioned that you studied engineering, but then for your masters you went to LSE and HEC, which are both leading institutions for finance. Then you worked in equity research at Citi. After 2 years there, you decided to leave to start a career in consulting. I'm just wondering, why did you make that decision?
So perhaps in terms of my career, like I started working for Citigroup because I was very interested in the finance world. I mean, you live in London, you kind of want to experience this. And shortly after I worked there for 2 years, right? I started first on the trading floor. I worked in equity derivatives. I worked in sales, but then I realized, okay, I want to look more deeply into the companies and understand them better, and not just focus on liquidity and like how people buy, like what are the different kind of order flows, etc. So I wanted to focus more on fundamentals. That's when I joined the research team, and there I was covering European car makers and suppliers, so again, very similar to my engineering background. But did that for roughly 1.5, 2 years then there in the team, and you learn a lot about how you value companies, how you look at like industry trends, how do you do market forecasting, etc. But you are kind of at the peril and the will of the markets, right? Like if one day there is bad news, for I don't know VW, then your whole day essentially is this, and like it's a very stressful period. Lots of people losing money, like people are telling you, and this kind of every day looks different is interesting and exciting, but at the same time makes it difficult for you to do the actual work of like focusing on fundamentals. And that's when I then decided to move to the private market side. I joined Roland Berger in the London office, and did join the investor support team. So we were consulting private equity and venture capital funds. We were telling them or supporting them in their investment decisions in terms of like what companies they're looking at. Is it a growing market? Is the business plan solid? Yada, yada, yada. And we did that for roughly 3 years. And at some point, you get to this point where you decide, okay, well, do I always want to just advise people or do I want to take risk? And I think it's kind of in my DNA that I like to take risks. I think I'm quite good at taking decisions, and so that's why I also want to be taking more decisions. And that's when I then decided to switch sides and join an early stage venture capital fund. For me, why early stage? So I always had in mind that I wanted to start a business one day, but coming from like banking, consulting, you're like, okay, so well, what do you even need to start a business, right? How does that even work? It was a very big stretch for me. Didn't really have any network in the startup ecosystem, and so I thought, okay, venture capital, I can apply some of the skills that I've learned, but at the same time, I will build up a network. I learn about early stage companies, like what happens in the first 6 months, 18 months, etc. And it was a great experience. I learned an awful lot. I met a lot of great people. And also, I think there, working at the fund, I realized that the fund operations and like the whole data quality is not where it needs to be. And this then also gave me the idea for Bunch to say, okay, well, you need to build like an ERP system for investors. You need to build automations for investors. You need to store the data. You need to make it more accessible to people, and also provide more access again to private markets, because if you look at them on a macro level, private markets have been booming. They will continue to boom over the next decade. Like 150 trillion in assets are looking to access private markets, and they currently don't have ways to do that because the infrastructure is just stuck in the 80s. At the same time, private markets are really the core innovation and value creation driver of our GDP. Kind of the US, how many $100 billion companies are still private? And providing this access to private markets is something that is kind of like the mission and vision of Bunch. And to do this, we believe you need structured data, you need good processes, you need the right infrastructure for people to access these private markets. And yeah, that's for me, I would say, the big mission over the next 10 years.
What would be your advice to young people who have a long-term aspirations to found their own companies, but are also interested in exploring the world of finance, perhaps an analyst or a few years or so?
It's a good question. I think generally when I look at what I've learned over my career, I think there is a ton of stuff you learn in big organizations. Like generally, I was taught incredible amount of stuff my time at Citi and my time at Roland Berger, and I learned not only like content, I learned strategy, I learned also how to communicate, how to present, how to write memos, yada yada yada, which in small organizations you have to learn on your own. So I think it's something where also you have to look at yourself, like, do I want this kind of very structured educational system essentially of finance companies, consulting companies, or do I want to just go and learn it myself? And I think both are valid journeys. For me, why did I choose the finance way? I think I wanted to have like this stamp on my CV of an organization that is kind of renowned and makes it easy for me to communicate on eye level with other people. And the second thing is, once you are, for example, like a senior consultant in one of those consulting companies, this is always something you can fall back on. You will always be able to say like, okay, I've shown that I can do this, and that's why I will always be able to at least do something on that level. And for me, this kind of security was important, right? So it's not like I come from like a super, super wealthy family where I can just say like, whatever, I'll take a risk. If it doesn't work out, I'll go back to the family business. So this was something that was really important for me. And once I had that, it made it also easier for me to start taking risks. And when I then looked at like actual like starting a business, this is always also a bit of a stressful situation because you essentially take a jump, you don't know will it work out, you don't know also how to finance yourself, right? Like you may not have a salary for a while. I was in a lucky position that me and my co-founder, we were ideating a little bit, as you do as a 20-year-old person, where you always say like, oh man, we should start a business together. And so you kind of we had different ideas, and then also were quite quick to get funding thanks to our network. So this helped us then also really actively and consciously make the decision to say, okay, let's now try this and try to really build something big in this industry. And so in terms of advice, what's important, right? I mean, need to kind of find your way, which way is the right way for you. Doesn't like I think both paths are valid paths. And then I think it's having people that you trust, that you want to work with quite closely for a very long time, because whoever you are co-founding with, it will be like a marriage. And the second thing is like make sure the idea is good, or the space is interesting, because you might be pivoting a little bit left and right, but like it doesn't make sense for you to be working in an industry that you don't find interesting, that's not growing, that's not exciting. And then third, I would say make sure you have a strong network of supporters around you, because you will always need them. There is no such thing as a self-made man. You need supporters, whether it's investors, whether it's people introducing you to customers, whether it's people introducing you to talent, like all of these things you need a strong support system for.
Levent, how did you actually found Enrico as a co-founder?
Yeah, so Enrico and I, we were friends before. So we're both from Frankfurt. We know each other for a while. And we were, I would say, solidly like going on trips together, etc. This was a friendship that then turned also into a partnership in that sense. And yeah, for me, like what we realized is like we have similar ambitions, we have similar interests, we have similar CVs as well if you look at them, but we have a quite complementary like also skill set and soft skill set, where I think a bit more long term. Enrico is more operational, tactical. And also kind of like in the attitude and team leading capabilities, etc. So this is still very, very important for us. And I think when you start a business and it grows, like there's so many different areas that you need to cover. So what's really important is to have trust that the other person is smart, but also as committed as you are. So from that point of view, like super, super happy to have him on my side.
Just wondering, what were the main or biggest difficulties in your transition from equity analyst in London to later a consultant to an VC investor?
I would say like on the banking side, like everything is very much numbers driven. So you always like you look at the numbers, you do forecasts. Like if it's not in numbers, then it's very, very difficult. You do also try to spin a narrative, but it's very much, I would say, much more like analytics focused and numbers focused. Well, in consulting, it was a lot about like building a storyline, thinking about how to communicate things easily, effectively to people. And this was a really, really great school again for me to learn these things. And when I then came to VC has been a lot more, I would say, like big picture thinking, like almost like you don't have a lot of data to rely on, right? So it's a lot of interviews with potential customers, like trying to understand the solutions. And that was very, very, I would say, different again. Like we did expert interviews in consulting as well, but like the type of validation you need to do for the venture capital industry to invest into startups is a bit different. And you look at so many companies, like you say no to 99, and you find one interesting, and then the whole also way of winning the deal is a lot different, right? So once you decide, okay, I want to invest in this company, there's probably a few others that want to invest as well. So you need to then start convincing the team and tell them why it's a good idea to partner with you. And so this is also something that I think was a very, very good journey to have this kind of more sales experience as well. Yeah, but I think everywhere I could apply some of the skills I've learned previously and learn new skills and build more knowledge.
The venture capital you worked at was B2B tech focused, right?
Yes, exactly. It was a B2B seed stage fund.
And later you founded yourself a B2B tech company. So what really convinced you that this was the right industry to start a company at?
So first, I think B2B, like coming from a very much B2B world, right? Working in banking, working in consulting, working for a VC funded B2B. This is the majority of stuff that I've learned, right? So I have never really looked into like how does a D2C company work, etc. Like this is not something where I had a lot of experience. And also the nice thing about B2B is like yeah, it's more difficult to close a customer and win a customer, but like they pay you more and they probably pay you for a longer period of time. And so that was something that was important for me. I think when we then looked into different ideas, like I really believed into fintech as a general sector. And then within fintech, what we spent a lot of time on is really thinking about investments, thinking about, okay, also on the private side, like private equity, venture capital, like startup investments, like how do you like how is this industry still this, I would say, archaic, right? Like everything is kind of just paper based, Excel based, people just speaking with each other about deals. Like nothing is, it's not like the public markets where you type a name of a company into Bloomberg, you get all the financials, you get all the latest news, you see the analyst reports, and you can make yourself an idea quite quickly. And we strongly believe that private markets should look a lot more like public markets, because a lot of the data can be now taken from unstructured documents, put them in a proper database. You have a way to do analysis on top of this data with LLMs, etc., to give you insights. So we really felt like there was a very big opportunity there. And the things that we started with are really kind of like, how do you set up an investment entity? Because this already is a big problem for most people. Like if you two together want to invest tomorrow, you're going to go through a world of pain trying to figure out, okay, what does it mean? Like what are the taxes? What are the costs? And so that already makes it very difficult for the majority of people to access investments, because just have to have a lot of money. And so we try to slowly but surely build the ramps, the rails for private markets, and that's just something that was very, very natural for us, and very also natural interest and curiosity for it.
What gives you this strong belief in the fintech industry?
I think generally, if you look at the companies that have been growing or have been really big successes over the last decades, there's like lots of different businesses, and you will find 1,000 reasons why what I'm saying makes no sense. But like a lot of them come from the payments infrastructure, the financial infrastructure space, and this is just because like when there's a lot of money flowing, there is also a lot of way of making money. And if you then think of the kind of like, there's also other people have put it in way better words than I do, but like every company will become a fintech company at some point, because every company is in the business of having financial flows in either direction, and they have customers that they need to provide perhaps credit to, etc., etc. So it's an industry, like it's very kind of like easy way to say fintech, right? But ultimately you kind of touch every industry if you work in financial services. And that's something that I think just provides a lot of opportunity for growth, a lot of opportunity to build big businesses. And that's just something that I think is also most interesting.
In general, in B2B, as I understand it, you can only be successful in the long term if your application is truly better, or you have a competitive advantage in some ways to your competitors, which is easier in a niche market. So what will be the next niche market that B2Bs are generally successful, or what niche market is still undiscovered,
Yeah, I think
if any?
there's two ways, right? There's two things. Like obviously your product should be better than what they currently have. At the same time, I think go to market and like your customer acquisition costs play a big role, right? So if you have a very good go to market team, you can also sell a product that's not necessarily better than the existing products. And that's what you see with the big incumbents, right? Like the incumbents, they have obviously lots of testimonials and customer case studies that they can point to, but they also have big sales teams, big customer success teams. Like they're able to really provide a good experience to the user and to the customer. And I think yes, you should build a business that is, or build a product that is better, that provides a better experience for the customer, that is potentially also cheaper than existing solutions. But at the same time, I think you can also just do in B2B especially very targeted, very specific sales. And this is then kind of like the beachhead market, right? You find this one industry that you say, okay, I'm making example for example, for us, of a bunch, right? Like we don't offer our product globally to everybody, right? We say, okay, we offer it only to German customers at the beginning. We only offer it to venture capital funds, so that we build up expertise in that specific niche, if you want, right? But from there, it will help us then take the learnings and bring it to the next stage. Whether it's geographic expansion, so into like new countries, we're now live in the UK since end of last year, or also into new asset classes, so like private equity funds. So we have the first ones now running on the platform as well. And so you kind of increase more the target customers that you are actually engaging with rather than necessarily the market. So the market of the services that we offer is huge globally, but like really have to focus and kind of draw your ICP, so your ideal customer profile, and then reach out only to those people.
That was really interesting that you mentioned that every company is going to be a fintech company or is becoming a fintech company, because yesterday I talked to Nazan Daneshvar, who is the founder and former CEO of Takhfifan, which is the Groupon of Iran, very successful. And Groupon had the problem with sustaining their customers because they just moved to other platforms. And she mentioned that she's sustaining her customers on the platform with providing financial technology. So Takhfifan is becoming a fintech company rather than a discount company. Very interesting. How did you get your first deal, and what advice do you have for B2B platforms which have similarly large contracts as you to start off?
Yeah, I think I mentioned at the beginning, right, that like network is super important, and obviously we had people that believed in us in the beginning. And as a startup and as a founder of a startup, you will always sell vision, whether it's 3 years out, 2 years out, 6 months out. You never really sell the product that you currently have, but like where it's going to be, and like especially in the first target customers, first customers we closed, it was all about convincing them that the future has to look different. The future cannot be like it is today, and that you need the people that are also willing to take the risks to essentially support this change and support innovation. And I think this is true for every business, right? Every first customer is stupid, right? Because like, why would you do this over something that's trusted and that other people are using? So, but at the same time, these people are real evangelists that help businesses and huge industries to grow and change. And so I think building a very good network, really clearly understanding the customer's problem, and going above and beyond to solve the problem, right? I think there's also programs, do things that don't scale in the beginning, right? And I think you hear of like the Gorillas founder back in the days, like he just delivered the first stuff on his own and made sure that the experience was great. And I think it's the same also in B2B tech, right? So there is always a service component of what you offer, and obviously the infrastructure, the tech solution has to work. But you also, if it's not yet what it will be at some point, you need to make sure that you kind of bridge the gap with perfect execution, perfect service.
In a recent interview, you've mentioned that your company has 45 employees and your cap the workforce at 100, even 3 years from now. This aligns very closely to a concept from Mythical Man Month by Fred Brooks, which suggests that software development, the cost of adding team member increases exponentially. It makes it, in a sense, to stop hiring engineers. Could you elaborate why you set that cap, and to what extent is that case for Bunch, and what is the rationale behind your organizational structure?
Yeah, I think generally the way we look at it, it's an aspirational goal, right? We don't want to have a huge team, because I think that the effectiveness of a team goes down with increasing size. And at the same time, I think you mentioned it as well, right? Like when you have these exponential complexity, where like if you have a system of 5 people, you add one more person to it, the number of nodes and the interactions, also like the second degree effects on these different relationships becomes huge. Knowledge gets siloed, like it's more difficult to push people from one problem to the other. And I also believe that we now live in a world where you have access to an incredible potential of automation, whether it's automating services, automating manual processes, automating like data entry. And I think there is always this kind of nice way of just saying, okay, let's throw people at the problem, because that works. But I think you need to be very careful, as it has impact on culture, as it has impact on the way people behave, as it has impact on your overall performance of the organization. And that's why we try to have like an automate first approach, where obviously we don't automate a process when we do it for the first time, but like when we do the process for the 10th, the 15th time, instead of saying, okay, now let's hire someone to take over that process full time, we say, okay, let's now get someone to automate this process. And that hopefully will continue to be the case going forward and will help us essentially not to have to hire like 100 people per month at some.
So what will be your advice for people working full-time? Just going back to the co-founding story with Enrico, I want to know your advice for people working full-time who want to found something and have struggles finding a co-founder or have struggles in the ideation process.
Yeah, I think generally the solution or like these ideas, they rarely you will find the best idea by just sitting in a room and say what are like or problems I can think of, right? It should be, and also will make it difficult for you as you build out this product or the solution for this problem if you have not really experienced it yourself so much. So I think like always try to think of the things in your work life, in your daily life, all the things that you think are a hassle. Try to find solutions for it. So don't say, okay, well, I have difficulty managing my calendar. I'm going to make a new calendar app because there's like 100,000 calendar apps out there, and perhaps there's already the solution somewhere. And if you don't find anything that helps you solve the problem, then try and figure out, are there other people that have a similar problem? And if you then get to this point where you say, okay, well, there's a lot of people that seem to have this issue, then you need to find someone that says, you know what, if you solve this issue, I'm willing to pay you X amount of money. And if you then see, okay, there's enough people out there that have this problem, and if everyone is willing to pay X, then I think there is a solid business case that I can build on. And this, I think, is really the best way to ideate. If you say, okay, I want to be self-employed one day, I want to start a business, to really go that route. I think after that, there's lots of other questions you have to ask yourself, like, do you want to bootstrap this? Do you want to like raise funding like from angels, from VC? Because all of these things have a huge impact on the type of business you have to build. But I think overall, like the best way to approach problems is always trying to figure out, okay, what problems have I seen myself? When it comes to finding a co-founder, I think starting a business is a very difficult journey. It's good to have someone with you. It's better to start than to wait until you find someone. And I think generally, if you find a big enough problem, an interesting enough problem to solve, you will also find people that are interested in solving it with you. And what's super important is that you keep a very high bar there. You don't take like anyone, right? Because like this trust, this capability, like is super important, because otherwise it will make it difficult as you scale, and you will have lots of problems. You have lots of mistakes, lots of setbacks to make sure that things still work out in that case.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing it. At Bunch, you're making it easier to manage administrative side of private market. How do you think AI is going to change the industry?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think so for us, when I look at the problems that we're solving, they are essentially complex pattern matching problems. So you have people having to take a document, finding a specific part of this document, taking this, putting it in an Excel, doing some sort of calculation, and then putting it into an output again. And I think what we see is that LLMs, and also like generally like the AI that we see today, helps you reduce the cost of this complex pattern matching. Like it helps you like essentially reduce the cost of intelligence, so that like these things that previously like bookkeepers would do, like I would say like people that have some sort of finance background, but not necessarily like the top 1% of their industry, right? That these kinds of activities will be automated first. And within private markets, this is a large part of the activity. So we see that there is a huge potential to automate stuff. At the same time, I think you have always this incumbents problem, especially in an industry that builds by the hour. Like, why would an existing accountant be willing to automate if they then charge not 10 hours, but only 2 hours, right? So from that, yeah, they would be getting more customers, but like the ultimate amount of revenue they do is the same. And so from that point of view, it helps like to win customers, because we are able to provide this automation, which reduces manual error and thereby then also reduces costs ultimately for the user.
Thank you very much for sharing these experiences. Really appreciate your time. and had a lot of fun talking to you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you too, guys. It was a pleasure, and yeah, excited to see how this.
Definitely
you
worth
very
it to
much.
stay up. Definitely
Yeah,
worth it to stay up.
Thank
very
you.
good. No, thanks, guys. Then I wish you good rest of the day. Let me know next steps. What if there's something you need from me, and then yeah,
I
looking
will.
forward to seeing you soon.